So, vampires are hot. I don't think this is a contentious, controversial statement, really. Like, the allure and appeal of them has come up in popular fiction and spicy AO3 entries for literal, and not exaggerating here, literal decades. I mean, let's pretend for the sake of this that archive of our own predates the internet, shall we? Incidentally, if you yourself went through a vampire phase as a teenager, I hope coming to terms with your sexuality wasn't too difficult. These things can be hard to deal with. Also, if you're telling me now that you dug vampires as a teen and are perfectly straight, okay, bro. Okay. Our predilection for bitey boys is not without precedent. There is a great history of how monsters can be attractive to those outside the social periphery, in particular queer folk. I'd recommend these videos by Lindsay Ellis and RenTheBarbarian that go deeper on this issue.
What?
And I mean, not only are vampires brooding loners of the night, at least that's the popular image, they're also monsters that look human, so they're a good gateway before you get into tentacle porn. It's appealing to have that kind of power from the periphery that's dangerous as it is alluring, both as a power fantasy and to be swept away in desires you know are not right.
Folks have made the case that the vampire's allure lies in its mystery. Neither human nor monster, alive nor dead, fully bad nor righteously good. They represent this enticing, attractive iteration of unknowable middle ground. They can never be rote, boring, rendered unsexy because they will always be riddled with mysterious otherness.
It's that duality, that contrast, that's so enticing and exciting for us. And it's something that's definitely evolved into a much more relatable lens as time has gone on. Gone are the days of yore with the affluent bourgeois menace and dark appeal of Bela Lugosi in Dracula, or the more lurid, violent and monstrous menace of Christopher Lee in the Hammer adaptations. We saw this shift in particular in the decades to come with the Anne Rice Chronicles, giving a Byronic romanticism to the old boys. The Lost Boys had a similar influence, giving this punk aesthetic and having to feel more relatable and, well, teen-like. This was doubled down even further with Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the late 90s, where vampires were not only cool and dangerous, but still feeling very human, and even teen heartthrob romantics.
Kiss me.
Bite me.
How about you both bite me?
More roses and chocolate than Rice's forever tortured angst. This eventually led to arguably the most influential transitions for the creatures in the early 21st century, with the absolutely insanely popular Twilight. Finally, vampires were twinky heartthrobs your mom and sister alike could get into. It wasn't just the hot topic weirdos, everybody loved the vamps. This led to shows like True Blood and The Vampire Diaries, which looked into this further and made them more relatable and human, fighting for causes like civil rights for their identities and, well, more complicated, intimate relationship dynamics. So the danger of this monster diminished somewhat, but exploring these creatures, granted both shows were based on books that predate Twilight, but I digress, was more in. We have films that explore pre-adolescence and are more terrifying than most modern vampire movies, let's be fair, like Let the Right One In. 2014 saw What We Do in the Shadows and The Underrated Summer of Blood, comedies that show vampires as kind of schlubby losers. And of course, the romanticism remained the same. As we move on from appealing to teen angst to a demographic never really in that much focus, awkward, directionless, kind of dorky 20-something dudes in the mid-2010s. Man, I wonder if I related to this film too much. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is a 2014 vampire movie, which was apparently a really good year for weird vampire movies, and one of the coolest things I've ever seen. The Persian film is a hodgepodge of contrasts and unlikely parts coming together. For example, despite this being set in Iran and the film is entirely in the Persian language, the film is actually shot in California. Not an uncommon practice, but I think knowing this adds to the disjointed nature. For example, the titled girl who walks home alone herself, a victim in most movies, a monster here, is not really the protagonist. She's actually not in the movie that much until roughly like 45 to about an hour in. Our protagonist is Arash, a young impoverished man our girl eventually takes an interest in. To clarify, she is credited as the girl. Arash is another mix of contrasts. Despite how I infer to him, he's actually quite attractive, with a James Dean kind of look and a cool car. A car that stands, well, in contrast to his poverty because he worked, in his own words, thousands of days to afford it. Despite everything going from him, he's sullen, cut off, introverted, and has a lot of deep-seated anger, a lot of which is over having to take care of his heroin-addicted father. We see this early on when he makes an awkward and bizarre demand of the attire of his boss Shada in the presence of himself, a man. Shada, a wealthy and self-confident woman, if a tad shallow, chews him out for this and puts him in his place, once again showing that the protagonist is not always in the right. The girl, meanwhile, is an isolated and observant vampire who preys specifically on lecherous or cruel men. When she murders a drug dealer harassing Rash, he steals the man's ecstasy and becomes loaded, going to a party dressed as Dracula. Shada convinces him to take one of the pills he's selling, and he wanders off from the party in a haze. This is where he formally meets the girl, skateboarding down the road. They go to her place where they start vibing in their loneliness and playing a song. One of the core themes of this film is the way society isolates us. Arash, with how people look down at him for his social standing and inability to connect with people, being constantly on the defensive over his father. The girl is, well, a vampire, choosing to push away from people to protect them mostly, going after who she believes deserve it. They meet by happenstance, and Arash's inebriated state allows him to be more vulnerable, and the girl connects with a man who may actually be a decent person. This dance of loneliness and the circumstances that isolate them comes to a head as they listen to a bop, Into Shots. The song is called Debt by the band White Lies, inspired by a plane ride and the writer imagining it crashing. It looks at the ever-encompassing fear of debt and regrets felt when faced with this possibility. This hits these characters well, who are clearly longing and pushed away from genuine human connection for various reasons. Obviously one for the girl being that she needs to kill people to survive. And I love that she's poised as so innocent and small, while Arash is literally a fucking Dracula, looming over her. Contrasts. Just two scenes. We have the song playing with a wide shot, focused clearly on both leads until he gets off the bed and spins the light. Then we go to a close-up of the two of them realizing their connection. There's that great sense of tension as she's just about to bite him, but something stops her. She hesitates in that moment, and I love it. It's just so naked and revealing. Like we're getting a glimpse into these people for the first time, and there's no words of dialogue spoken outside of the lyrics to the song. Maybe the girl is wanting to move away from her anti-hero murdering streak. Maybe Arash wants to move past the paralyzing anger and frustrations of being in the appropriately titled Bad City. It's hard to say, but this one cut scene gives us all we need to relate to this pair in their contrasts, their loneliness, and their longing for something more. So says we all as we offset eternity. And I think that's part of the attraction with the vampire. They appeal to our love of darkness. They appeal to the recesses of our humanity, sure. But they also appeal to our sense of loneliness. A figure skulking the night, looking for that human connection, however fleeting. Even with them looking human, it's no wonder we made them some of the more relatable monsters to our own desires. But hey, I could be thinking too hard on this. Maybe fear's got a hold.